I personally, captains, cannot sleep any more than I expect you can. And I can no longer lie still when I think of the position we are in. For there is no doubt that the enemy only made open war on us when they thought that their plans were complete. But on our side, there is now nobody who is thinking out countermeasures whereby we can put up as good a fight as possible. Yet if we relax and fall into the king's power, what sort of treatment can we expect from him? He is the man who cut off and fixed to a stake the head and hand of his own brother, his own mother's son, even when he was dead. So what sort of treatment can we expect, we who have no blood relation to take our side, and who marched against him with the intention of deposing him and making him a subject, and killing him if we could? Will he not go to all possible lengths, trying to inflict on us every conceivable misery, and so make all men afraid of ever marching against him again? No, it is surely clear that we must do everything in our power to avoid falling into his hands. Now, personally, while the truce was in force, I could never stop feeling sorry for us and looking with envy on the king and those on his side. I considered what a large and splendid country they had, what inexhaustible supplies, what quantities of servants, of cattle, and gold, and clothing material. And then I thought, on the other hand, of our men's prospects, that we could only get a share of all these good things by paying for it, and I knew that there were not many left who had the money to do so, and that the oaths we had sworn prevented us from acquiring supplies in any other way except by paying for them. When I reckoned all this up, I sometimes used to feel more misgivings about the truce than I now do about the war. Now, however, they have put an end to the truce, and I think that the period of their arrogance and of our uneasy feelings is also ended. For now, those good things lie in front of us as prizes for whichever side shows itself to be the better men. The gods are the judges of the contest, and they will naturally be on our side, since it was our enemies who took their names in vain, while we, with many good things before our eyes, resolutely kept our hands off them because of the oaths we had sworn to the gods. So it seems to me that we can enter the contest with much more confidence than they can. Then we are physically better able than they are to endure cold and heat and hardship. Our morale is, with the gods on our side, better than theirs, and if the gods grant us victory, as they did before, our enemies are easier to wound and kill than we are. Quite likely there are others who feel the same as I do. Well then, in heaven's name, let us not wait for other people to come to us and call upon us to do great deeds. Let us instead be the first to summon the rest to the path of honor. Show yourselves to be the bravest of all the captains, with more of a right to leadership than those who are our leaders at present. As for me, if you are willing to take the initiative like this, I am prepared to follow you. And if you appoint me to be your leader, I do not ask to be excused because of my age. Indeed, I think I am already sufficiently grown up to act in my own defense. That was Xenophon taking control. In this book, this is the Penguin edition of Xenophon's Anabasis, but in this Penguin edition they call it the Persian Expedition. Not really sure why Penguin decided not to call it the Anabasis, but they didn't. They called it the Persian Expedition, which it is indeed about. This tells the story of a bunch of Greek mercenaries who are hired by Prince Cyrus of Persia to bring their 10,000 mercenaries into the Persian Empire and battle and defeat his brother so that he, Prince Cyrus, could be the great king of Persia. That was the plan. It didn't exactly go the way the Greeks hoped it would. Things went kind of terrible. So the Greeks marched into the Persian Empire in 401 BC. They fought a great battle there, deep in the Persian Empire, and they won. They defeated the army they faced. The Greeks, they were pretty darn tough, they were, when they were all in proper formation in their armor with their shields and their spears. But Prince Cyrus was killed. And Prince Cyrus was the only reason they were there. They were there to get Prince Cyrus to be on the throne. So now here they are, deep in the Persian Empire, all alone, with the reason for their being there now gone. So any Persian ally of Cyrus, they're not going to stick around with the Greeks. They got to get on the good side with Cyrus's brother. So, yeah, due to treachery, the main generals of the Persian army are killed, and the Persian army, the mercenary army that Xenophon, the author of this book, is a part of, elects Xenophon as one of their leaders. And he tells the story of their march back to the sea. All along the way, they suffer hardship and privation. The Persians are trying to kill them the whole way. There are other angry tribesmen who are there that are trying to kill them. Everybody's trying to kill these guys. And so they have a tough time of it. It is a struggle to survive on their way out of the Persian Empire. They had a tough time of it, these guys. And this is a fascinating story. It is one of the most fascinating things that you will read from the ancient world. Xenophon was a really interesting guy. He was Athenian, a mercenary, for a while with the Spartans. He continued the history that Thucydides started of the Peloponnesian War. Thucydides died before he could finish the Peloponnesian War history. Thucydides just picked it right up from where he left off, and he continued the history, but he wasn't the historian, unfortunately, that Thucydides was. Not even close, really. But he is a really interesting writer, and he wrote a few books that are still available for us to read. This one, the Anabasis, being one of the most fascinating, just because of the position that these Greeks are put in. And there are just a bunch of little things that you learn in this book about the Persian Empire at the time and about the Greeks at the time. And so it's kind of, in a way, a kind of rousing adventure story, sort of, and an interesting history of this experience that Xenophon and these 10,000 soldiers had. And I, of course, highly recommend it. But I no longer recommend this edition. For a long time, this was probably the best edition of this book that you could get. But now, recently, this has finally been published. I've been waiting for this one for literally ever. This is the landmark Xenophon's Anabasis, edited by Shane Brennan and David Thomas. The series editor is Robert B. Strassler, and the translation is by David Thomas. So Robert B. Strassler started the landmark ancient history editions. He did Thucydides and Herodotus all by himself, and then a bunch of others came. Well, not a bunch of others, but quite a few came after that. And most recently was actually a Roman history. It was Caesar's histories, and now we have the continuation of the Greek histories. And the landmark editions, I've showed them before. I've showed my beat up landmark Herodotus, which I've carried around with me everywhere for about 10 years or more, however long I've had that book. But this one just came out, and this one, of course, is so much superior to the to the Penguin edition. For one thing, because there are a ton of maps. Of course, there are going to be countries in here who have, and they have different names than the places that they have now. So there are a bunch of places that you wouldn't know where they were without these maps. And they do travel quite a bit. So it's really handy to have these maps. And also at the bottom, you've got a ton of notes, of course. Xenophon was writing this well over 2,000 years ago. He had no idea how much the world would have changed. So yeah, we're going to need some notes to figure out what he's talking about sometimes. There are a ton of appendices, though. Starts even earlier than this. Yeah, this much of the book is just supplementary material. That's the history there. This is just the extra stuff. And the extra stuff is really, really valuable. It always is in these landmark editions. Aside from just the maps, you get a lot of illustrations and pictures in these landmark editions. And they really give you a sense of the world at the time. They're all chosen deliberately for a reason, every single picture that they put in these landmark editions, and they're just fantastic. And this is a fantastic edition of this. I have not read it yet, so I can't speak to the translation. Actually, the translation that I just read you was from this one, but I've kind of poked around at it, and it seems pretty good, but I haven't read the whole thing yet. I will. I don't know if I'm going to get to it this year because I've got a lot of other ancient histories I'm going to be reading before it, and I'm going to be talking about that in a future video. So you'll be seeing this guy again along with a bunch of other books. So yeah, the Anabasis. This is a fantastic story, and if you're interested in history at all, you really want to read this book. No matter what edition you get it in, this is very readable. This is just way, way better. And if you can get this one, I, of course, would recommend you get this one. All the ancient histories, they're better in these editions. They're large, but they're fantastic. So yeah, Xenophon's Anabasis, I highly recommend it. Okay, guys, I will see you here next time.